Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prepping with Anne channel, where I help you prepare for emergency situations of all kinds because it's better to be safe than sorry. We hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And I think we can all agree with recent events that it's more important than ever to prepare for emergency situations, which is why I prepared today's presentation. And today we're going to cover all of the basics for long-term food security that you need as a prepper. Inflation on goods is at an all-time high, and it's only set to not only continue but be heightened by the conflict currently going on between Russia and Ukraine. Both countries play a role in the global food supply chain. Russia supplying quite a significant amount of fertilizer, and Ukraine often being referred to as the world's breadbasket producing grains. And so I'll put a link to some articles in the show notes if you want to read more about this and how the conflict between Russia and Ukraine could affect food and fuel prices. So before we get started, if you're new to prepping and you don't know what to do first, I created a beginner's prepping guide, which will get you set up with the basics in 30 days or less. Prepping can be a minefield if you're new, and it's important not to feel panicked and to make the best purchasing decisions and prioritize the most important preps, especially if you're on a smaller budget. So please visit the show notes in the description box and purchase a prepping guide if you feel that that will be useful. And you can get a discount if you sign up to my newsletter, link in bio to that as well. So I'm going to get through the presentation first, and then afterwards, if you want to do a Q&A or just a general chat, we'll get to that. So the first thing that's really important as part of your long-term food storage are dried and canned goods. These will keep for the longest time in your prepper pantry. Most dried foods will keep in their original packaging for a long time, but they can keep for even longer if you do things such as vacuum sealing or put them in storage buckets with oxygen absorbers, or vacuum seal them in things like Mylar bags that prevent oxygen from getting to the product. And with canned goods, it's generally said that canned goods never really go bad, but as long as there aren't any dents in the can, that it should be fine sometime after its expiration date. But it will lose nutrients after its expiration date, but they're generally fine for much longer. As a general rule of thumb, you should buy what you eat and eat what you buy, so you can rotate your supply and make sure that you don't waste food. Make sure to always try an item before buying it in bulk to make sure you like the taste. This is a mistake that I've made before, buying items in bulk, and then I went to try it and it was just disgusting. So I had to give it to somebody else to try to see if they wanted it. And thankfully, my friend did like it, so I was able to just give her all of my food. So definitely make sure that you try things before you buy in bulk so that you don't waste money or you don't have to end up returning things. In terms of long-term dried food, the typical things include rice, pasta, beans of all varieties, oats, and wheat is actually a much better option than flour. You can just grind it. Flour tends to go bad quite quickly. It's not generally advised that you buy flour in bulk. You can buy wheat in bulk and grind it instead. I'll do a separate video on the best items to stock up on long terms and which ones aren't the best to stock up on long terms. And also MREs, short for meals ready to eat, are a great addition to your pantry. These can usually be prepared by adding water or heating without any other preparation, and they're great for food prep immediately after a disaster situation, so that you don't have to spend a long time cooking or cooking from scratch. There are also MREs that are specifically made to have a much longer shelf life, up to 25 years, so do explore different brands and check the reviews. And MRE packets are also a great addition to your prepping kit, especially for your bug out bag, if you ever need to leave your home and seek refuge elsewhere. So that's stockpiling and stockpiling dried foods and canned goods. So the second thing that you need to consider for long-term food security is water and also ways to purify water. You can go for weeks without food, but only a few days without water. So water storage is vital, not just for drinking and cooking, but also bathing and keeping clean. You can buy 5 liter bottles, that's just over a gallon for my friends in the US, from most supermarkets, and keep these stored. You'll use through your initial water storage quite quickly though. So knowing how to collect water, collect rainwater, and also purify that water once your initial supply runs out is also vital. And there are many different ways that you can purify water. The most common ones is to buy a water filtration system, but the good ones can be quite expensive. You can also get just very small filtration straws, but a more budget option is water purification tablets and also droppers. These are a lot more affordable and can be bought in bulk. Just remember that you need to get the water and the tablet or dropper balance right to make sure that the water is purified properly, or you don't use too much of the product. It's also very useful to have a fabric mesh to filter out large sediments, and also look to buying containers to collect and store your water. And also look for local water sources, such as lakes and ponds and streams nearest to you if things got so bad that you ever needed to actually collect water supplies from somewhere else. And so that's water. The next part of your food security plan should be food preservation. And this is not only knowing the various ways that you can preserve food, but also the tools that you need to preserve those foods. So different preservation methods include pressure canning, water bathing, pickling, dehydrating, fermenting, freezing, salting, and oil preservation. Those are just a few. I'm going to do a completely separate video going through these in more detail. And food preservation is also very important if you're thinking about growing a garden, or you've got a homestead and you know that you're going to have excess produce, or if you're buying food in bulk to preserve long term. And I think that I would say with food preservation is, like all things with prepping, don't wait until the 11th hour to practice these methods, because you'll probably need a couple of tries to get them right. My first batch of pickled eggs were an absolute disaster. I boiled the legs for too long and they had a horrible rubbery taste. The jars that I used were really horrible quality and they ruptured. So I was actually scared to eat food in case in case the food had been contaminated. But despite all of the mishaps, I can confirm that personally, practicing food preservation is one of my favorite prepper tasks. I actually do really enjoy it because I enjoy cooking and handling food. And also very important as part of your long-term strategy is actually knowing how to cook from scratch. This is a vital skill. It's amazing how many people actually don't know how to cook a good meal, how to work with different ingredients and spices. Knowing how to do those things can just add a lot more joy to your cooking and also eating, because if you have all of your basic supplies, eating the same thing over and over again can get quite boring. And also keep in mind that in the long term, things like sealing bags, storage jars and lids, these should also be bought in bulk and stored away, just in case of an emergency or shutdown situation or supply chain issues. And these things may not be available for very long periods of time or become more expensive. So that's food preservation. The next one is growing your own food. So I believe that it's going to become an incredibly important and vital skill by the end of the decade to know how to grow your own food. It's an art that comes with many trials and errors, so it's best to get practicing as soon as possible. We are moving into spring now, so it's the perfect time to start. It's a lot easier to start learning to plant in the spring when the produce is just easier to grow rather than starting in the winter, although you can obviously plant many things during the winter. But I do think it's a lot more enjoyable to plant in the spring. For those of you who live in urban areas, and no worries, there are plenty of ways to grow food in urban environments and apartments using things like grow bags and utilizing space on balconies, for example. So look for city preppers who have plenty of tips and tricks for you on how to grow foods in urban environments. And another option is also renting out an allotment if there are any available where you live. And it's also advised, if you do live in a city, to think about perhaps looking in the future to get a home base if you know you're going to move, perhaps where you're going to have a lot more land to have space to plant in your garden. And if you already do have a garden, instead of growing lots of lawn, why not grow lots of food? I also just think that growing your own food is one of the most rewarding things that you can do. It's got this beautiful quote here by Wendell Berry: "A person who is growing a garden, if he is growing it organically, is improving a piece of the world. He is producing something to eat, which makes him somewhat independent of the grocery business. But he is also enlarging for himself the meaning of food and the pleasure of eating it." And I absolutely do agree. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more difficult to control what goes into our food with the advent of GMOs and a lot of the preservatives and things that we use in food now. It is affecting our health. So I do think it's more important than ever to learn how to grow your own produce, because organic produce is quite expensive. Now, the next one is something that a lot of people don't think about, and that's looking for food in the wild. If things ever got really bad, this is something that for some people that they may have to consider, and it's something that has happened in the past. During World War II in Britain, for example, foraging and looking for certain things in the forest was actually government mandated. You could look up things like World War II and rose hips. They sent people out to go and get rose hips because rose hips contain a very high percentage of vitamin C. I think it's something like 10 times more than oranges. So foraging, fishing and hunting. So with foraging for plants, I suggest perhaps watching some videos online, and also getting a pocketbook and having a pocketbook with you and learning how to identify different plants. I recently watched a video that somebody did on common plants in the United Kingdom. There was like 30 different plants in this video. And then I went out to the forest and I was actually pleasantly surprised that I could find 10. So you actually really underestimate what you can find in the forest. And it's actually just very fun, especially now that it's spring, to go foraging. Just be very, very careful that you are able to identify the plants properly. Maybe actually look into a foraging course. I can't speak for other countries, but I know that in the UK, there are many places that do foraging courses. And to be extra careful, especially with things like mushrooms, you can really hurt yourself, poison yourself if you're not very knowledgeable about things like mushrooms. So I would definitely recommend doing a foraging course, and also fishing and hunting, if that's something that you're okay with. If you're not, that's fine. But they are also food sources. I have a lake near my house, and you can actually go fishing there. So that might be an option for some people. And the next thing is keeping livestock. So there are different livestock that you can keep, and obviously depends on how experienced you are. But for most people starting out, they're probably going to start by keeping chickens. Chickens is the easiest to keep, the most low maintenance to keep, and most people with a big backyard can probably keep chickens. Cows would be the next one, and cows are not just great for their meat, if you do eat meat, but also for milk and making cheese, and also the manure can be used for fertilizer, and then also goats also can be used aside from their meats, but also for milk and making cheese. Goats, compared to cows, are also less disease prone, and also sheep. And I do know some people that keep some deer. So that's keeping livestock, but that would be keeping livestock would be for most people once they've got all of the other things in check. And of course, some people just because of space won't be able to keep livestock. And so once you've got all your food in place, you need to make sure that you have options for off-grid methods of cooking. If the grid was to go down, how would you actually prepare your food? So that's also something to think about. You can get gas and alcohol and oil-powered cookers, camp cookers, rocket stoves. You can make DIY brick stoves. You can see here somebody actually made a stove using just cans. But I think for most people, the easiest thing would just be to get some camp cookers for emergency. You can also just use things like barbecues, and get some gas canisters to power those. You can buy those easily off of Amazon. So there's various different methods. Look into all the different methods, and the University of YouTube is the best place to look for ideas. So that is pretty much all. We'll just finish off with a Q&A and a chat. And again, just to remind you, if you are new to prepping, do have a look at my prepping guide. I'll put the link in the bio for that if you're interested in looking for a beginner's prepper guide and you're just looking into prepping and you just don't know where to start, because it can be a bit of a minefield. So let's see who's here. Oh, I'm so happy to see so many people from my other channel. If there were any questions, or if you had any input, any tips and tricks yourself, then I'll take those. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up and call it a day. But thank you so much, everybody, for attending the chat. No problem, Margarita. And so nice to see you, Denise Jones, Crystal J, Cookies and Cream. Who else is here? Eldridge, hello. Shill Stewart, hello. Eldridge, does peanut butter have a shelf life? I've heard preppers say that peanut butter doesn't actually have the best shelf life long term. So look into that a little bit more. But from what I've heard other preppers say, no to peanut butter having a long shelf life. But I am going to do a video on the best foods to keep long term and the worst foods to keep long term. But thank you so much for your question. Right, if nobody had any other questions or comments, then I'm going to just close out in about 10 seconds or so. Okay, I think that will be all. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If you're subscribed to my other channel, I guess I'll see you over there. And I hope to see you here again for plenty more videos on prepping and preparedness. And always remember, guys and dolls, do not panic. There is nothing to panic about. Panicking is the worst thing that you can do. Do not feed fear and anxiety. We prepare for the worst, we hope for the best, and we keep it moving. And I will see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye.